Have you ever had an experience as a patient where you were scared to death? I have. I've had a number of them. Probably the most recent one was when I was in Argentina visiting my son Jason. I just spent the week, or actually a month, producing more dentistry than I have at any time in my career. I felt good. I did a lot of production. Financially, it was a good month for me, and then I took a week vacation. Over the course of my career, I tend to overwork. I work way too hard, and when I take a vacation, usually that's when I get hurt. So I push through it. I've never taken a day off from the office until COVID. Before that, about 35 years of work with never taking a day off. But every time I go on vacation, my back will go out and I'll end up on the floor. It'll be 2 or 3 days, trying to find a masseuse to get me out of pain and spasm. Well, that's happened to me when I went down to Buenos Aires. We took a side trip to Chile, and I started to feel funny, and I said, I don't think I could drive anymore. So I thought it was the stress of driving. We flew back to Buenos Aires that night. I woke up the next morning, and the room was spinning. Everything was double. I had double vision. And the first thing I thought was, okay, I just had a stroke, or I have a brain tumor. And I'd recently lost a friend that had a brain tumor who happened to be a dentist. So I said to my wife, Carol, I said, I got to get to the hospital. Now, she thinks I never get sick. And she thinks I'm an Iron Man. So if I ever show any weakness, she usually says to me, you're fine. But everything was double. And it was creeping me out. So I went to the hospital. Now, I don't speak Spanish. My son, who now speaks fluent Spanish, was newly arrived in Argentina. And so I'm in a hospital with nobody speaking English. Nobody speaking Spanish to people who only spoke English. They told me they don't treat double vision in the hospital. It was a major hospital in the city of Buenos Aires. They told me to go to a special clinic just for ophthalmology. And I went to the clinic and I met with a nurse, and she was going, double. I didn't know what she was talking about, meant double. And finally, I was escorted into a room to see Dr. Mauricio Martinez. Now, Dr. Martinez was a very elegant doctor. He was educated abroad, he spoke perfect English, and he was extremely nice and kind and compassionate. And he made me feel safe. So here I am in a country where I don't speak the language, in a clinic that I don't know what's going on, and Dr. Mauricio made me feel safe. And he looked at me and examined me, and he says, what you have is the lateral rectus of your right eye isn't working very well because the small arteriole that went there got occluded. And my friend Dr. Zarich says it's an eye stroke. He was teasing me. But basically, I didn't get very good blood flow to that lateral rectus. He says it's not an uncommon thing. He says, you've been under a little bit of stress lately. And I was, because I spent a lot of time in the clinic. I worked almost every day that month. So I was very stressed out. And I was starting to relax. And oftentimes when the body starts to relax, things that you've been keeping down underneath will come to the surface. That's been my experience, and I see it with my patients as well. And then he told me something interesting. He says, you're fine. Your vision will be completely normal in 3 months, but you have to not do any surgery. He says, but just to be safe, let's take a CAT scan. Now, my fee in his office that day was $15. And he gave me his cell number, and he then set up an appointment to CAT scan. I went to the hospital, had a CAT scan, and the fee for that was $100. So far, $100 for the CAT scan, $15 to see Dr. Martinez. I went back to his office the next day. I didn't have an appointment. I just walked in and he said, come on in. He comes in and he goes, you're going to be fine. He says, in 3 months you'll be better. Well, I didn't believe him because I was in a foreign country and I was nervous. I felt very, very safe and cared for, but still, I have double vision and I need my eyes for my job. So I go back to the United States, and of course I have to go up to now Yale, because I go to the best. I see an ophthalmologist in Fairfield, and he says, go up to Yale, go see a neuro-ophthalmologist, and I see the top neuro-ophthalmologist at Yale, and she evaluates me, and she says, you should be better in 3 months, but let's get another x-ray. This time, let's get an MRI, with and without contrast. So I have 2 MRIs, one without contrast and one with contrast. The fee for that was $10,000, insurance paid $2,000, I paid $8,000. And then I had to pay her in her office. And I saw her 3 or 4 times, and she said, you'll be better in 3 or 4 months. I didn't believe her either. So then I went to go see an acupuncturist. He says, you should be fine in 3 or 4 months. He did acupuncture, which was painful, it was in my eye. But basically, 3 to 4 months after my initial visit with Dr. Mauricio, my vision returned to be completely normal after that period of time. I did not do any surgery for 2.5 months. So all that production, all that money I felt very comfortable making that month before I went to surgery was for naught, because for the next 3 months, I did very little treatment. All I did was consultations with an eye patch on. Now, my patients didn't feel that comfortable with me with an eye patch, but I didn't even know that. I was comfortable doing the exam with one eye, and then I got booked up 3 months in advance. And that was about 7 or 8 years ago. I've been booked up 3 months in advance since that time, but that's another story. But what I realized was that healthcare, in a, not really a third world country, but part of it's third world in Argentina. I mean, this guy was elegant. He was really nice, Dr. Mauricio. But he only charged me $15. I got phenomenal care. And he was right. It took 3 months. It came back. And then I went up to Yale and I had all the sophisticated testing. And they told me the same thing. 3 months. Except when I went to the doctor's office at Yale, it was a large office. I did not get the doctor's cell phone number. When I walked there, I had to open up a glass door, or they opened up the glass door. It says payment due at the time of services. It was a completely different experience. So what am I saying? Why do I say this? Because it's important that we relate to our patients and make them feel safe when they're in our office. The most important thing we can do for a patient is to make them feel safe and make them feel heard. I had that experience, not in the first hospital in Buenos Aires, but with Dr. Mauricio. And I'm indebted to him for the rest of my life. And I even have a chapter in my book where I have 3 or 4 pages that are dedicated to him, because I think about him every day, and I think about how kind he was. It brings me to one more quick story. When I was in college, my father had a dermatological problem, and he went to see a doctor in our town called Dr. Oestreicher. He's a dermatologist in town, and he was the best dermatologist in town at the time. It was about 25 years ago. And I went into his reception area with my father, and it was packed. There had got to be about 30 people there, and he was the only doctor there at the time. When my father's time came, Dr. Oestreicher called him back, and he sat down. And I remember Dr. Oestreicher looking at my father and spending all the time with him that my father needed. My father asked a lot of questions. He's an engineer. He's very detail-oriented. Dr. Oestreicher spent the time listening to him. And I'm thinking, he's got 30 patients in the reception area, and he's acting like my father's the only patient in the world. And I said to myself, because at that time I knew I wanted to be a dentist, I hope one day I had the same empathy, patience, time, and will exercise the same care to my patients that Dr. Oestreicher did to my father. So it's important that Dr. Oestreicher was the gift, Dr. Mauricio was the gift, and that I continue to hopefully be the gift to my patients. So if you're not taking the time with your patients, spend that extra moment, that extra minute. It doesn't take much. It will give so much to say to your patient, hey, you're in the right place. I'm here to take care of you. If there's anything you need, please call me anytime. If you want to give me your cell phone number, you can. I happen to do that with all my patients on my business card. But that's up to you. It doesn't ring off the hook. I have a cell phone here. It hasn't rang once today with any of my patients calling me. But having them know that they can call me on my cell phone makes them feel safe. And that's what this is all about, to make our patients feel safe, because they're scared to death when they come and see us, just like I was scared to death when I was in Argentina. So Dr. Mauricio, if you're listening to this, thank you very much. Dr. Oestreicher, if you're still practicing, I hope you're still doing a great job. Actually, I do know Dr. Oestreicher, and he's just about ready to retire, but he's still the gift to his patients, as I hope you are. So remember, be the gift.